Part 1. The sky over Geneva was clear that morning, the kind of calm blue that made people forget the galaxy was full of strange stars and stranger beings. Inside the Earth Council chamber, however, the air felt heavy, not with heat or noise, but with something quieter, certainty. Daniel Ford stood alone at the center of the room, his hands resting lightly on a smooth obsidian podium. He was not a soldier, not a scientist, not even a politician in the old sense. He was simply the voice chosen to speak for all of Earth. Outside, the city moved as usual. Trams hummed along their tracks. Children walked to school with backpacks bouncing. Farmers on Mars checked their hydroponic fields through data streams. On Titan, engineers adjusted the fusion grids that kept domes warm against the cold. Life went on, unaware that everything was about to change. At precisely Euro 900 hours Universal Standard Time, Daniel pressed a small button on the podium. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, then silence. Across the galaxy, every active comm channel, assembly frequencies, civilian bands, emergency relays, even pirate chatter on the fringe worlds, flickered and locked onto a single feed. It was Earth's official broadcast signal, unused for decades. Now it carried one message and one message only. "People of the Galactic Assembly," Daniel began, his voice calm but firm. "This is the final transmission from Earth under your charter. Effective immediately, we withdraw from all treaties, agreements, and alliances formed under the Galactic Assembly. We will no longer participate in joint operations, trade networks, or diplomatic councils. Our borders are closed. Our data streams are sealed. Our ships will not respond to hails." He paused, not for effect, but because the weight of what he was saying needed space to settle. "We do not declare war. We do not accuse. We simply choose a different path. Earth is no longer part of your union." The transmission ended. No music, no logo, no repeat. Just static, then silence. On Xylos Prime, the capital of the Assembly, chaos erupted before the static even faded. The Grand Concourse, a vast open plaza where hundreds of species mingled daily, froze mid-step. A Veln merchant dropped a crate of luminescent fungi. A Krell envoy slammed his three-fingered fist into a data pillar, cracking its surface. In the High Council rotunda, alien delegates shouted over each other in a dozen languages, none of which could express the depth of their shock. Earth had been a cornerstone of the Assembly for 112 years. It was the only human world, yes, but more than that, it was reliable. Earth ships had defended border colonies from raiders. Earth doctors had helped contain the Miri Plague. Earth engineers had rebuilt the warp gate at Cygnus after the solar flare disaster. To lose Earth was not just to lose a member, it was to lose balance. Back on Earth, no sirens sounded. No alarms blared. The withdrawal had been planned in secret for years, known only to a handful of council members and a few trusted scientists. The public had not been told, not because they couldn't be trusted, but because the decision wasn't open for debate. The council had studied the data, weighed the risks, and reached a conclusion. The Assembly was holding humanity back, not through malice, but through design. The Assembly demanded consensus. It valued stability over innovation. It discouraged radical leaps in technology, biology, or consciousness, anything that might destabilize the galactic order. But Earth had begun to change in ways the Assembly could not understand, and would not allow. Now those changes would happen in private, in orbit. Earth's defense grid, once linked to Assembly Command, switched to autonomous mode. The massive ring of satellites, drones, and shield emitters powered down their external comms but kept their sensors active. No weapons were raised. No threats issued. The system simply went quiet, like a door closing gently but firmly. On Mars, Governor Lena Cruz watched the announcement from her office in New Ares City. She had argued against secrecy. She believed the Assembly deserved an explanation. But she also understood why none was given. Words would only invite questions, demands, maybe even intervention. Silence was cleaner, safer. She turned off her screen and walked to the window. Below, red dust swirled in the thin wind. Human children played in sealed parks, laughing under artificial sun lamps. They didn't know their world had just been cut off from the stars. Maybe that was a gift. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, panic spread faster than light. Trade ships halted mid-jump. Banking systems froze as Earth issued credits lost value. The Krell hegemony immediately moved 3 battle groups toward the Sol border, not to attack but to test the silence. Would Earth respond? Would the assembly act? The assembly did not. It was too stunned, too divided. Some species called for emergency talks. Others whispered that Earth had been taken over. By rebels, by machines, by something worse. But no evidence supported any theory. Earth's biosigns remained normal. Its cities still glowed at night. Its farms still produced food. It was as if the planet had simply decided to stop talking. In a quiet lab on Proxima Centauri B, a young xenolinguist named Marcus Bell reviewed the transmission for the 10th time. He played it through human ears, then through filters that mimicked Xenthar hearing, Miri resonance, even Krell subsonic perception. Nothing changed. The message was plain, final, human. "What did you find?" asked his colleague, a soft-bodied Mary named Ula, her voice bubbling through a translator. "Nothing hidden," Marcus said. "No code. No distress signal, just goodbye." Ula pulsed gently, a sign of deep unease. Why would they leave? They had everything. Respect, influence, friends. Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the star map on his wall, at the tiny dot labeled Sul. He remembered visiting Earth as a student, walking through forests older than his species, tasting real fruit, hearing human music that made his chest ache. Earth had always felt like a bridge between worlds. Now the bridge was gone. Back on Earth, Daniel Ford left the chamber and walked into the sunlight. No crowd waited for him. No reporter shouted questions. He passed a woman watering flowers on a balcony. She nodded at him, not as a leader but as a neighbor. He nodded back. High above, the last assembly courier ship received Earth's final automated reply. "Channel closed. Do not attempt recontact." The courier turned and fled toward the nearest relay station, its pilot trembling. And Earth, for the first time in over a century, was truly alone, but not afraid, not yet. Part 2. Weeks passed and Earth said nothing more. No signals, no broadcasts, not even a single data packet slipped through its orbital firewall. The silence was complete, and in the galaxy, silence from a world like Earth was louder than any explosion. Ships that once carried Earth grain to the outer colonies now drifted in holding patterns, unsure what to do. Trade routes that had hummed with human freighters fell quiet. Even the black market dealers who sold Earth-made neural chips stopped listing them. No new stock was coming, and no one knew why. On Xylos Prime, the panic had settled into a dull, constant hum of fear. The Assembly's emergency sessions stretched into days, then weeks. Delegates argued over whether Earth had been invaded, had collapsed, or had simply chosen to vanish. Some species demanded action. Others warned against provoking a world that had once held the balance of power. But without answers, the Assembly could only watch and wait. Lena Cruz still lived on Mars, though her title as governor now meant little. Earth had cut ties with all its off-world settlements too. No more supply ships. No more orders from Geneva. Mars, Titan, the belt stations, they were on their own. Yet instead of chaos, something strange happened. People stayed calm. They rationed what they had. They shared tools, fixed broken systems, and kept the lights on. It was as if Earth's silence had taught them to rely on themselves, not on distant promises. Lena spent her days walking through the hydroponic farms, talking to engineers, listening to teachers. No one asked her what Earth was doing. They knew she didn't know, but they trusted her to keep Mars alive, and that was enough. Far from the red sands of Mars, in a small diplomatic outpost near Proxima Centauri, Marcus Bell tried to make sense of it all. He had been Earth's liaison to the Xenthar for 5 years. He spoke their clicking language, understood their honor codes, even shared meals with them, though their food looked like glowing moss and tasted like metal. Now his job had no purpose. The Xenthar kept asking him questions he couldn't answer. "Why would humans cut themselves off?" asked Kira, a young Xenthar diplomat with silver feathers along her neck. "Is it a ritual? A punishment? A test?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't think it's any of those. Humans don't act without reason, but sometimes their reasons are internal, hard to see from the outside." Kira tilted her head, a sign of deep thought among her kind. "Then we must look harder." But looking harder got them nowhere. Earth's digital borders were sealed tighter than any vault. Every probe sent toward Sol was gently deflected by automated drones. No weapons fired, no threats made, just a quiet nudge back into deep space. It was like trying to knock on a door that no longer had a handle. Meanwhile, the galaxy began to feel the absence. The Veln Trade Compact, which had used Earth's quantum encryption for secure transactions, started to unravel. Without that backbone, fraud spiked. 2 minor species nearly went to war over a disputed mining claim that Earth used to mediate. The Krell hegemony, sensing weakness, pushed deeper into neutral zones, testing whether the assembly would respond without Earth's fleet backing it. It did not. On a remote listening post orbiting a dead moon in the Orion Arm, tech specialist Priya Nair monitored the silence. She wasn't part of the assembly. She worked for a private research group that studied cosmic background noise. But even her quiet corner of science felt the shift. Earth's withdrawal had disrupted long-range sensor calibrations. Something about the way Sol's system now interacted with subspace was different. Not broken, just changed. She reported her findings, but no one listened. Everyone was too busy panicking to care about subtle energy shifts. Back on Earth, life continued in ways no outsider could see. Cities still stood. Trains still ran. Children still went to school. But the streets were quieter. Fewer people walked outside. Most activity had moved underground, not because of danger, but by choice. Vast networks of arcologies now hummed beneath the surface, connected by tunnels lined with soft light and humming conduits. People gathered not in plazas, but in shared mental spaces accessed through neural links. They weren't hiding. They were focusing. No one on Earth missed the galaxy. Not yet. They had turned inward, not out of fear, but because they had discovered something new. Something the assembly would never understand, and might try to stop. In Geneva, Daniel Ford met with a small group of scientists in a room with no windows. They spoke in low voices about resonance fields, quantum coherence, and the nature of consciousness. Earth hadn't left the galaxy because it was angry or scared. It had left because it was changing. And change, when it's real, cannot be shared until it's complete. Out in the stars, rumors grew wilder. Some said Earth had built a weapon that could erase stars. Others claimed humans had uploaded their minds into a digital afterlife and abandoned their bodies. A fringe cult on Xylos Prime even preached that Earth had ascended to a higher plane of existence and would return one day to judge the unworthy. Marcus heard these stories and sighed. He knew humans better than that. They weren't gods or monsters. They were just people who had decided to walk a path alone. One evening, he stood on the observation deck of the outpost, staring at the star that was Sol. It looked the same as always. Steady, distant, ordinary. But he knew better. Something was happening there. Something quiet. Something big. He wished he could ask them why. But Earth wasn't listening. And maybe, he thought, that was the point. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of something the galaxy wasn't ready to hear. Priya, on her lonely moon, noticed something odd that night. Her sensors picked up a faint pulse from Sol. Not a signal, not a message, just a ripple like a stone dropped in still water. She recorded it, labeled it anomaly, and filed it away. She didn't know it yet. But that ripple was the first breath of a new kind of human. On Mars, Lena watched the sunset paint the dust clouds orange and purple. She missed Earth not for its power but for its quiet strength. She hoped they were okay. She hoped they knew they weren't forgotten. But Earth had already moved beyond hope. It had stepped into certainty. And the galaxy, still shouting into the void, had no idea what was coming. Part 3. The Galactic Assembly was falling apart, and everyone knew it. Without Earth's steady hand, old rivalries flared like dry grass in summer. The Krell hegemony pushed deeper into the Orion Arm, claiming abandoned trade lanes as their own. The Veln Trade Compact collapsed when its credit system failed without Earth's quantum ledgers. On the fringe worlds, pirate clans grew bolder, attacking supply convoys that once flew under Earth's protection. Fear spread faster than facts, and facts were in short supply. On Xylos Prime, Assembly Director Omar Hassan paced the length of his office, his boots clicking against the polished stone floor. He had spent 30 years building trust between species, smoothing over conflicts, finding common ground. Now it felt like sand slipping through his fingers. He called emergency meetings, but fewer delegates showed up each time. Some had already pulled their fleets home. Others whispered that the assembly was dead, and Earth had pulled the plug. Omar refused to accept that. He believed Earth had not abandoned them out of spite, but for a reason they couldn't yet see. And if there was a reason, there was hope. Hope meant action. He gathered a small team in a secure chamber beneath the assembly spire. No records were kept. No names were logged. This was not official business. It was something quieter, riskier, necessary. "We can't wait for Earth to speak," Omar said, his voice low but firm. "We need to see for ourselves what's happening in Seoul. Not with warships. Not with demands. With eyes and ears only." He chose 2 people for the mission. Jake Morrow, a human scout pilot who had flown border patrols for the assembly for over a decade. Jake knew Earth's systems better than most humans alive. He'd grown up on Titan, but his parents were from Oregon, and he still carried a faded photo of Mount Hood in his flight jacket. He wasn't loyal to Earth anymore, but he understood it. That was enough. The second was Priya Nair, the tech specialist from the listening post near Orion. Her anomaly reports had caught Omar's attention. She saw patterns others missed, and she wasn't afraid of silence. They would fly a stealth corvette called the Wayfarer, small enough to slip past sensors, fast enough to vanish if needed. Their orders were simple: get close to Earth, observe, and return. No contact. No interference. Just truth. Jake and Priya met for the first time in the hangar where the Wayfarer waited, its hull dark and smooth like a riverstone. Jake nodded at her. "You ever been to Earth?" "Only in dreams," Priya said. "My grandmother was born in Mumbai. She used to tell me stories about monsoons and street food. I've never seen rain fall from a real sky." Jake smiled faintly. "It's wetter than it sounds." They loaded supplies, checked systems, and ran diagnostics in silence. Neither spoke of the risk. They both knew Earth's defenses hadn't gone soft just because they'd gone quiet. If anything, they might be sharper. 3 days later, the Wayfarer slipped out of Xylos Prime under cover of a cargo convoy. No fanfare, no farewell, just a ship vanishing into the dark. As they jumped toward Sol, the galaxy behind them grew more unstable. A skirmish broke out near the Cygnus Gate. 2 minor species accused each other of stealing data cores once guarded by Earth patrols. The assembly sent mediators, but without Earth's authority, no one listened. The message was clear. Earth had been the glue, and now the pieces were scattering. Inside the Wayfarer, Jake piloted while Priya monitored sensor feeds. They used old human clearance codes, ones Jake remembered from his early days in the fleet. To their surprise, the outer sensor nets around Sol didn't reject them. They simply acknowledged the signal and let them pass. It was like walking into an empty house where the door was still unlocked. "That's not right," Priya murmured. "If Earth's closed off, why are old codes still working?" "Maybe they want someone to look," Jake said. "Or maybe they just don't care anymore." They drifted past Mars first. The red planet looked quiet. No ships in orbit, no comms chatter. But life signs were strong. Farms still glowed under dome lights. Power grids hummed steadily. Mars hadn't fallen. It had just stopped talking to the stars. Then they reached Earth. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting slowly. Cities lit up at night just as they always had. But something was off. No satellites moved in predictable patterns. No cargo haulers lifted off from spaceports. No data streams pulsed between continents. It was like watching a painting of a living world, beautiful but frozen. Priya ran deep scans. Billions of biosigns, all accounted for. But surface activity is minimal. Almost all movement is underground. Underground, Jake frowned. Massive arcologies, deep networks, energy signatures unlike anything in the assembly database. It's not military. It's integrated, like the whole planet is one system now. They waited 2 days watching. No alarms sounded. No drones chased them. Earth knew they were there. They had to, but did nothing. That silence was more unnerving than any threat. Finally, Jake made a decision. "We're going down." Priya didn't argue. They picked a landing zone in what used to be Colorado, flat, remote, and far from major population centers. The Wayfarer touched down in a field of dry grass, its engines cooling with soft sighs. The air smelled like rain and soil. Real rain, real soil. Priya stepped out first, her boots sinking slightly into the earth. She breathed deeply, eyes wide. It's alive. They walked for hours, seeing no one. But signs of life were everywhere. Fresh footprints near a stream, a half-eaten apple under a tree, a drone hovering silently over a field of wheat. Then near dusk, a figure appeared on a hilltop. He was young, maybe 20, wearing simple clothes and carrying a tool belt. He didn't look surprised to see them. "You're from out there," he said, nodding toward the sky. Jake kept his hands visible. "We just want to understand. Why did Earth leave?" The young man, Eli Dawson, smiled gently. "We didn't leave the universe. We left the noise. The assembly wanted us to stay small, to fit in, to agree. But we heard something else. A hum beneath everything, a pattern in the silence." He led them to a nearby entrance, a smooth archway built into the hillside. Inside, soft light glowed from the walls. People moved calmly through wide corridors, not speaking, but somehow communicating. Their eyes were bright, focused, at peace. "We're not hiding," Eli said. "We're becoming. And you can't become while everyone is watching." Jake and Priya exchanged a look. They had come for answers. They had found something stranger, hope wrapped in mystery, and for the first time since Earth went silent, they understood. It wasn't an end. It was a beginning. Part 4. Jake and Priya stood inside the hillside entrance, the cool air humming with a sound too low to hear but easy to feel. It was not machinery. It was something deeper, like the planet itself was breathing. Eli Dawson walked ahead of them, his steps light, his posture relaxed. He did not look at them like intruders. He looked at them like guests who had arrived late to a quiet gathering. They passed through wide corridors lined with soft glowing panels. People moved in silence, but not the silence of fear or secrecy. It was the silence of focus, of shared understanding. No one spoke, yet no one seemed alone. Some sat in circles with their eyes closed, hands resting on smooth stone tables. Others worked at consoles that showed shifting patterns of light, not data as the galaxy knew it, but something more like music made visible. Priya watched closely. Her tech-trained mind tried to name what she saw: neural networks, quantum resonance, collective consciousness. But the words felt too small. This was not just technology. It was biology, thought, and connection woven together into something new. "Your scans must have shown strange energy readings," Eli said, as if answering her unspoken question. "That's because we're not just using power. We're sharing awareness. Every person linked to the network adds to it and draws from it. It's not control. It's harmony," Jake frowned. "So you're all connected? All the time?" "Not all the time," Eli said. "Only when we choose. And only with consent. It's like hearing a song in your head that others can hear too if they listen, but you can always step away. The silence is still yours." They entered a larger chamber, open to the sky through a transparent dome. Below, fields stretched into the distance, tended by quiet machines and calm humans. In the center of the room stood a single chair, empty. A soft pulse of light rose from its base every few seconds. "That's where Daniel Ford sits when he joins the network," Eli explained. "He doesn't rule anymore. He listens. And sometimes he speaks for all of us when words are still needed." Priya thought of the announcement. The cold, clear message that had shaken the galaxy. Now she understood. It wasn't a rejection. It was a boundary. Earth wasn't shutting the door out of anger. It was closing it so it could grow without being pulled back by old expectations. "Why didn't you explain this to the assembly?" Jake asked. Eli smiled. Would they have understood? Would they have let us continue? "The assembly fears what it cannot measure. And this can't be measured." Not yet, he was right. The assembly valued proof, data, repeatable results. But what Earth had built was felt, not tested. It lived in the space between thoughts, in the quiet after a shared breath. To explain it would be like trying to describe color to a blind species. Possible, but pointless without the experience. They stayed for 2 days. No one questioned their presence. No guards watched them. Food was left outside their room. Simple bread, fruit, water that tasted sweet and clean. At night, they watched the stars through the dome, the same stars that now felt distant, almost foreign. On the third morning, Eli took them to a high ridge overlooking a valley where thousands of people sat in stillness, eyes closed, faces calm. A low hum filled the air, not from speakers but from the ground itself. "This is the daily resonance," Eli said. "We align our thoughts not to think the same thing, but to remember we're part of something larger. It's how we heal, how we learn, how we dream together." Priya felt tears in her eyes. She had spent her life listening to the noise of the universe. Radio bursts, engine whines, alarm signals. But this silence was full. It held more meaning than any transmission she'd ever decoded. Jake, usually quiet, spoke softly. Will you ever go back? To the stars, I mean. Eli looked at the horizon, not as we were. But maybe one day when the galaxy is ready to listen instead of demand, we'll speak again, not with ships or treaties. With presence. With peace. They knew it was time to leave. They had seen enough. More than enough. They returned to the Wayfarer with heavy hearts and quiet minds. As the ship lifted off, Priya looked down one last time. The fields, the hills, the hidden cities beneath the soil. They all seemed to glow with a soft inner light. Not of technology, but of life choosing its own path. Back in orbit, they sent a single encrypted burst to Xylos Prime. Not a full report, just a signal. Mission complete, returning. The journey home felt longer. The stars seemed colder. The silence of space no longer felt empty. It felt waiting. When they arrived at the assembly capital, they were met by Omar Hassan himself. He led them to a secure room. No windows, no recorders. Just 3 chairs and a table. What did you find? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake and Priya exchanged a glance. Then Priya spoke. Earth is not broken. It's not hiding. It's changing. Into something we don't have words for yet. She described the arcologies, the network, the quiet unity. Omar listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back, his face unreadable. Do they mean us harm? He finally asked. No, Jake said. They don't even think about us much anymore. Not out of pride. Out of peace, Omar nodded slowly. Then we must decide what to do. Fear them, quarantine them, or trust them. In the days that followed, the assembly debated fiercely. Some called Earth a threat. Others called it a miracle. But Lena Cruz, still on Mars, sent a message that cut through the noise. Let them be. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have. If they wanted to rule us, they would have stayed. They chose silence because they needed space to grow. We should honor that. Her words carried weight. Mars was still human, still connected to Earth in spirit, if not in signal. And she had seen no aggression, only quiet strength. The assembly voted. Not to invade, not to isolate, but to wait, to watch, to leave Earth alone. And so the galaxy held its breath, not in fear, but in wonder. For the first time, it understood that not all progress shouts. Some of it whispers. And Earth's whisper was changing everything. Part 5. Years passed, and the galaxy learned to live with Earth's silence. At first it was hard. Trade routes had to be redrawn. Defense pacts were rewritten without human signatures. New leaders rose in the assembly, some wise, some not. But slowly the panic faded. Not because Earth returned, but because the universe realized it had to go on without expecting Earth to lead it. On Mars, Lena Cruz grew older. Her hair turned gray, her steps slower, but her voice still carried weight. She helped build a new kind of society, one that borrowed Earth's self-reliance but kept its doors open to the stars. Mars became a bridge, not between Earth and the galaxy, but between memory and future. Children there learned human history, not as a lesson in power, but as a story of choice. In the outer systems, the Krell hegemony pulled back after a failed attempt to claim a former Earth patrol zone. Their scouts reported strange energy ripples near Sol. Not weapons, not shields, just a soft distortion that made navigation systems drift and comms crackle with static. They left the border alone after that. Even conquerors respect mysteries they cannot break. On Xylos Prime, Omar Hassan retired. He spent his last years writing a book called The Quiet Choice, a reflection on Earth's departure and what it meant for the rest of the galaxy. He argued that true strength was not in control, but in the courage to step away when growth demanded it. The book became required reading for young diplomats. Marcus Bell never returned to Earth. He stayed on Proxima Centauri, teaching xenolinguistics to new students. He often told them, language isn't just words. It's the space between them. And sometimes the most honest thing a species can say is nothing at all. Jake Morrow and Priya Nair never flew another mission. They settled on a quiet moon in the Andromeda Fringe, far from politics and war. They built a small home with a clear dome so they could watch the stars at night. Sometimes when the sky was still, Priya swore she could feel a faint hum. Not from the moon, not from their ship, but from somewhere deep in the direction of Sol. She never mentioned it to Jake. He probably felt it too. Back on Earth, life continued its quiet transformation. The arcologies grew deeper, not taller. People spent less time speaking and more time simply being. The network of shared awareness expanded, not through force but through invitation. Newborns were gently introduced to the resonance field, not to erase their individuality, but to help them feel they were never alone. It was not a hive mind. It was a chorus, each voice unique but all singing the same song of existence. No one on Earth missed the galaxy, not in the way others missed them. They had not rejected the stars. They had simply turned their gaze inward to find something the stars could not give them, peace with themselves. Then, one day, something changed. A single message appeared on every comm channel in the galaxy. Not just assembly frequencies, but pirate bands, emergency beacons, even private home systems. It was not audio, not text, just a pattern of light and sound that lasted exactly 7 seconds. No origin point could be traced. No encryption could be broken. It was simply there, then gone. Scientists studied it. Linguists analyzed it. Engineers tried to replicate it. None could explain it. But those who listened closely, those who had known Earth, who had felt its absence, understood. It was not a message in words. It was a feeling. A sense of calm. A reminder that they were still there, watching, listening, not judging, just present. Lena Cruz heard it in her garden on Mars. She closed her eyes and smiled. "There's still us," she whispered. Marcus Bell played it back 10 times. On the 10th, he cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. Earth had not forgotten them. It had just been busy becoming something new. The assembly held a special session. Some wanted to respond. Others feared it was a trap. But Lena, now an elder voice from Mars, spoke clearly. "Do not reply with words. Reply with silence. Show them we understand." So the galaxy did something it had never done before. It went quiet for 1 full hour. No broadcasts, no engine burns, no signals sent into the void. Just stillness. And in that stillness, many felt something shift, not in space, but in themselves. Earth never sent another message. It didn't need to. The point had been made. They were not gone. They were just different. And difference, when it comes from truth, does not need permission. Over time, other species began to change too. The Zenthar started holding silent meditations before council meetings. The Miri developed new forms of art based on shared emotional resonance. Even the Krell, once proud warriors, began to question whether strength always meant force. No one copied Earth. But Earth's choice had planted a seed, a quiet idea that progress did not always mean more noise, more speed, more control. Sometimes it meant listening to the hum beneath everything. On a clear night, if you stood on Mars and looked toward Sol, you could see Earth as a pale blue dot, no brighter than any other star. But those who knew its story saw more. They saw a world that had dared to walk away from power to find peace. That had chosen depth over distance, silence over spectacle. And in a universe full of shouting empires and hungry factions, that silence became the loudest truth of all. Earth had not abandoned the galaxy. It had given it a gift, the gift of space, of time, of the chance to grow up without a parent watching over its shoulder. And one day, perhaps the galaxy would be ready to join that quiet song. Until then, it waited. Not in fear, not in hope, but in respect. For Earth had shown them that the bravest thing a species can do is not to conquer the stars, but to understand itself. And that understanding had begun not with a bang, but with a breath. A single, steady breath held in the dark, and shared with no one, until it was ready to be heard.